you're gonna make a record, you're gonna need a place to record it. And you can really do that anywhere. Great records have been made in haunted castles, remote cabins in the woods, even in the backseats of cars. But I have always wanted to have a home studio. Last year, that became possible, and I set about building sound panels to acoustically treat the space. There are all sorts of panel builds, from this beautiful but extremely complicated one to more humble but still effective ones. And because I have no woodworking experience and the look of the panels doesn't actually impact their effectiveness, I decided to build the extremely complicated one. What is wrong with me? I've been in a few studios over the years, and I usually end up thinking, the space sounds great, don't love the look of the sound treatment. Then while watching this guy Chris Alasser build a Rhodes, I saw what sound panels would look like if they were built with design in mind. All sound treatment is already pretty expensive. The beautiful pro stuff costs a lot of money, and my band's last album made my parents proud. So the only option that fit my aesthetic goals and my budget was to build it myself. The one person I found on YouTube with instructions on how to build something like this was this guy Davey Struggle. And the comment section of his video really should have scared me away, but instead I thought, yeah, I can do this. So I recruited my bandmate Chandler to help me, as well as my dad, who actually does have woodworking experience, as well as a lot of tools and saws. Davey, or Mr. Struggle, not quite sure if we're on first name basis yet, already has a great video on how to build these, so I'm not going to go through every step in instructional detail, but I will outline where I did things differently from him, and all the things that I messed up. Not that you would make those same mistakes, but I sure did. I will also put the dimensions of the panels that I built in the description of this video, in case anyone else is an absolute glutton for punishment like me. Materials-wise, I followed Mr. Struggle's panels pretty closely. I did choose a different fabric. I wanted something that had a little bit of a mid-century feel, and I found this speckled fabric from Robert Kaufman Fabrics that really gave me that mid-century vibe. When I received it, I noticed it was a little bit more transparent than I'd expected, so I decided to add another layer of white fabric beneath it, purely for aesthetic reasons, and because who doesn't love adding an extra 20 hours to a project. I also decided to use Varathane Golden Pecan stain instead of the one that Davey used. I tested a few stain options on some veneer edge banding and then compared them to a piece of mid-century furniture that I liked, and the Golden Pecan ended up being a pretty good match. The main difference between Davey's panels and mine was that Mr. Struggle built his panels flush to the wall, and that seemed to work pretty well for him, but I decided to build my outer frame a little bit wider so there'd be a 1-inch gap between the absorbing material and the wall to increase the absorption coefficient of my panels. Chandler, what is absorption coefficient again?
So the absorption or attenuation coefficient of a material is just a measure of how much sound it absorbs versus how much it reflects. Generally speaking, a thicker material will absorb more sound, but you can also increase this coefficient by adding a gap in between the end of your material and the wall. This will help attenuate bass frequencies and low mid frequencies because these long wavelengths have to come through the material, reflect off the wall, and then bounce back out and pass through the material again. Mathematically, this can be modeled using this power law here, where we...
Cool. Because of this larger gap, I decided to use wood cleats that I built from 3/4-inch solid pine. That was still a little bit short of the 1-inch gap in the back of the panel, so I built some shims out of 1/8-inch ply that I had lying around from a coffin I built for a friend for a music video. He was a vampire. So step by step, we had to saw the plywood into strips, bevel the edge of half our inner frame pieces, glue and nail the inner frame pieces together, saw the inner frame pieces into 2 and 4 foot lengths, nail and glue those lengths of the inner frames together, sand the inner frames so the fabric won't catch, tape the outer edge of the inner frames because we were afraid to sand that part, line the back of the inner frame with fabric tape, one side at a time, attach fabric to the back of the panel and staple it in, trim the edges and staple the corners, insert the sound absorbing material, then attach both layers of top fabric to seal the absorbing material in, saw the outer frame lengths into 2 and 4 foot segments, iron the veneer edge banding to the outer frame pieces, sand the outer frame to prep it for stain and to make the edges look good, glue and nail the outer frame pieces together, stain the outer frame twice, then add a layer of polyurethane, finally fit the finished inner frame into the outer frame housing. Cut the cleats for the wall and the panel, add a cleat into the back of the inner frame, and finally, nail the cleats to the wall and hang the panels. Easy enough, right? Now here's everything we messed up along the way. With the very first frame piece we cut, we had a spatial reasoning issue. We were using our miter saw with the blade rotated 45 degrees horizontally. We went back and forth a little bit on whether we should rotate the wood or rotate the saw, and I'm not entirely sure how we did it, but we managed to cut the angle of our corner backwards, ruining that length of wood. For future cuts, we opted to tilt the saw 45 degrees rather than rotating it, which allowed us to cut the wood on its most stable interior side, and idiot-proofed the cut for us because it made cutting the angle backwards impossible. Again, I'm sure most of you would never make this mistake, but I did. So many issues in this build arose just from the fact that we didn't have a large flat surface to work on. I think a big flat carpentry surface might actually be the most valuable tool you can have in this project. We ended up buying a cheap piece of sheathing for like $6 to give ourselves a really big flat area to work on, and it made our lives so much easier. Speaking of that, we accidentally curved a bunch of our inner frame pieces because we did not have a big flat surface to work on, so we were nailing those between two sawhorses. We did not notice that the wood was dipping between the two sawhorses when we nailed it, and we basically nailed that dip into the full 8-foot length of several of our inner frame lengths. It was a pretty mild dip and it ended up being fine, but obviously it'd be better to have none dip. We left a bunch of black marks on some of our frames because we used the nail gun upside down. It sanded off and was fine, but still annoying and made more work for us. Check if your nail gun works upside down before using it. It turns out that if you use a right angle clamp, it doesn't actually guarantee you have a right angle at the top and bottom of your frame. We started compensating for this by manually applying inward pressure to the corners of our frames to make sure they weren't bowing out. But because of this issue, we had to sand a lot of wood from our first frame to get the inner frame to fit into the outer frame we had built for it. And that probably added about 3 hours to our build time for that one frame, which was not fun. Using a circular fabric trimmer and a veneer edge trimmer will save you so much time. I've now built frames with the right tools and using a utility knife to do both those jobs, and the difference is night and day. Those two buys are worth their weight in gold for this project. Our frames were all built to the same measurement, but there ended up being a little variance between them. How much variance, you might ask? That might seem tiny, but a 1/16 of an inch can mean a lot of sanding or a very loose fitting frame. And since we opted not to nail our outer frames to our inner frames, we wanted the fits to be pretty snug. To solve for this, we started cutting all of our outer frame wood after building the inner frames, and then measuring those inner frames to see how much we need to add or take away for each frame that we built. That sounds like we had to custom build each frame, but it basically amounted to adding or subtracting about a 1/16 of an inch every time. And after quite a bit of hassle getting our first 4 frames to fit, our last 8 inner frames all fit in the outer frames we had built for them perfectly. Nail holes in our first panel looked pretty bad. We tried using Varathane's fill stick that matched the golden pecan stain we used, and the results left a little to be desired. So for future frames, we patched our holes with wood filler that we mixed with the stain that we used before we did the staining. On those ones, you can barely tell where the nail holes are, and we even used it on some of the corners. Seriously, looked great. We accidentally made 3 frames with a 1.5 inch gap instead of a 1 inch gap because I lost the paper that I wrote our measurements down on and tried to do it all from memory. After that, I wrote every measurement down in my notes app to account for me being the person that I am. On a few of the panels, we had to staple the top fabric twice because we didn't stretch it enough, and after a couple weeks, it started looking saggy. Basically, if you're using a non-elastic fabric, just give it like 20% more stretch than you think you need to. I think the biggest mistake that I made in this project was letting an untreated space stop me from recording. Now, full disclosure, the difference in sound in my studio space is huge. That said, we would probably have a record finished if I had just recorded this record the same way I recorded my last one. Very least, I could have done my demos in this untreated space, no problem. One thing I might be underplaying here is just how long this process took. Not sure if anyone noticed the way my hair is growing and then gets cut throughout the making of the panels. I started this build in April and finally finished the last frame and got it hung in my studio in December. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was doing this in my off hours, so was doing this weekends and after work, but truly a ton of time went into these, and for most of it, I felt like I was losing my mind. Sound treatment is sick, but so is finishing songs, so, it's a balance. So now, here's the finished panels. And this is the difference in sound.
Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, rolling on through the night. Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, rolling on through the night. Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, rolling on.
Huge thanks to Davey. I changed my mind. I decided we are on first name basis. I built your panels. I understand your madness. And I couldn't have done this without you. So go watch his video. He's an amazing woodworker, and as far as I know, designed these himself. If you really want to hear how this space sounds, stay tuned. We're recording an album in here. The ultimate test is how much freedom this allows us in the recording process and how it informs the decisions that we make in this space. So stay tuned. The jury's kind of still out here. And if you have any thoughts about what we did well or what we did poorly, let us know, especially if you're an acoustician with tips on other things we could do to improve the sound of this space. We would love to know that, and we'll pin your comment to the top if you leave one so everyone else can see too. Okay, bye.